help agents, salespeople be more productive with the leads. Salesperson, salespeople, we care about making commission, right? We want to make more commission. They might dip their toe in the water and see this and they get a bad experience and they're like, no, that doesn't work. You can keep your retainer lower, but you make more money off of every single appointment that you book.
People just want their time back. Okay, so listener or watcher, we have Mark today on from Hot Prospector. Mark, say hello.
Hey, or hello.
Yeah, hello. So we've worked together in several different formats, and we were also talking today about what I think the topic I really like, which is that we have an immense opportunity. I think, my personal opinion, is that there is a huge opportunity in the space to do call center strategies, but more like what I like to do, which is it's easy opportunity for other agencies and other people, and I shouldn't say just agencies, but people to just do anything to support their business with something simple, right? So talk a little bit about Hot Prospector. If people don't know who you are or what it's about, give us like the 5-minute overview, because there's a lot to it. And I think people should be aware of what it does.
So I know the name probably, like, your mind starts going like, what could Hot Prospector be? Just because the name, right? You're like, it must be a room full of people who are like hot and they're salespeople, right? I don't know if that's what you immediately start thinking, but we are a sales automation company. We help we help agents, salespeople be more productive with the leads that they generate, whether it be mostly we support teams that have inbound leads coming in from various sources and they struggle with speed to lead and also cadencing their leads in a way that's going to induce the highest connection and conversion rate. So that's what we do.
Yeah. And what I really like about what it's about is that there is so much here that needs to be done for these customers who need help with just closing business. In fact, we have this discussion all the time with, we have a handful of clients. Obviously, I ran an agency before with hundreds of clients, and we worked with you with our call center strategy, because we built a call center and we needed, real software to run it, and you came in to save us, and I really appreciate that. But what I really knew, which I thought was something after I sold the agency and then came back to you, and I said, the industry needs something simple where they can make a solution for a customer, because we all know customers, the end user, not the agency, but an end user is just difficult because they don't have the strength to put up the fight to call somebody 18 times, right? And we all know this it's a waste of time to even fight this argument. They'll say they'll do it, but they never do. Okay, so whatever. But to me, I look at this and I go, the business model has always been pretty simple, which is if we can take this model, which is, Mr. Customer, you want to have a new customer, right? You want to have a new client, but you don't want to work at all. We're all the same. I don't want to pick up the phone and talk to anybody either. And then we put a software in the middle, right, which is high level. And then we put a layer on top, right, which now allows us to integrate potentially lots of cool things with talking, communicating, measuring, analyzing the conversation between the person and the owner or the person who wants to communicate with the client, or if it's a call center person, a call center rep, to get sort of quantifiable, let's just say data, because that's the best way to put it, about the closing of that person into either an appointment or a sale or whatever it might be. Right now, that's just missing in like 99% of the people's conversations, unless they already have this type of software, which is very rare for a small business to have this. Now, take what you have, layer it on top of high level, put a call center rep in wherever the small business is, and just say, you're good to go. We're taking everything. You're going to see everything, and you're going to analyze, and we're going to do it for you. I mean, to me, I think that's simplicity. What do you think of this business model? We talked about this today.
Like, it's probably the biggest opportunity that agencies don't even know. It's right in their nose. They're talking to people all day long, and they think the problem is they don't have enough leads. But the real challenge that these companies have is they don't know how to convert the leads that they get. And it could be because they don't have time. It could be they don't have the right people. It could be a mixture of both. But yeah, no, it's a huge opportunity for agencies, and I'd say the easiest one to solve.
Right. And the funny thing is that the business model doesn't have to be sold. It just basically is, do you want this or not? You don't have to put up a fight to tell somebody, do you want us to answer the calls for you? Because they're going to say yes most of the time if you basically have a client that is small because they don't have the resources. And the small amount of cost to pick up a phone and solve a problem for someone, as opposed to getting and hiring and putting someone on payroll and then giving them health insurance. I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on about a real strategy is, how do we make people's lives easier? That's what I come down. Every single time I talk to clients, they don't want money. They don't want more leads. They don't want this. They just want things to be simpler because they know they don't want more on their plate. That's like 90% of the problem. People just want their time back, you know? So talk to me a little bit about what are the advantages if I'm using Hot Prospector. Again, maybe talk a little bit about how it layers on top of other software, because a lot of people may not know how simple these things connect and what they really mean for somebody.
You know, I think sometimes people just generalize all software, that has a CRM as the same. So if I talk to somebody who doesn't really know any better and I tell them what Hot Prospector does, they say, oh, I have Go High Level, which is, I see that on your shirt there. So Go High Level, it's the same thing. I don't need a software like that. And when we get into the nuts and bolts of what it actually does, well, it's a complete game changer for somebody who's using High Level, because High Level is a very powerful marketing automation system, but it wasn't designed thinking, hey, we're going to have a bunch of people logging into it, trying to get through over the phone as many leads as possible. And on top of that, we want to reach out to them quick. Oh, by the way, I'm also going to have a whole bunch of sub accounts because I'm selling this as a service. So I want to offer that too to my clients. So yeah, the big problem, and I talked to a lot of people who've tried a bunch of different software. The big problem that they have when they try to do those things, either for their own company, or 10 or 100 like you've experienced in the past with all these different clients, they're in a bad situation. It's impossible. It's impossible whether it's one, to be able to do it. So how we layer on top of them of High Level, for example, is different than any other dialer software out there that kind of does what we do, is that we connect to all of their client accounts, all of them, and we allow them to kind of funnel all of their leads into one specific location where you can see them coming in, and you don't even have to be clicking around throughout that one software. It's literally in one specific screen. So your agents can stay on that one screen, make all their calls, answer all their calls, reply to all their texts, update all of their leads, do everything that you would do in High Level by switching around to different contacts on one screen. So it just makes it so efficient that if you wanted to offer this as a service, the margins can be just insane because of how efficient it is. To give you an example, I've had clients that were using High Level or other tools connected to High Level, and they might have one agent handling 3, 4, 5 clients.
Yeah.
Then they put them into Hot Prospector. That one agent is handling 20 something clients. And not to mention getting rid of a ton of, dead time that they can't account for, because Hot Prospector gives them a lot of insights into what those agents are doing. So I don't know. I hope that kind of answered your question, but essentially it puts them in a power position with either their own clients or themselves or all of their clients to be able to be way more efficient.
Yeah, and so just for example, for what we used it for back in the day, right, when I had my previous agency, is that we would have dozens of clients, and then everything would come into one area, and we could have a couple of reps managing dozens of clients. We wouldn't have to be, subservient to switching between different snapshots between clients. We could just have them all come in. And the only thing that really, to me, was the accelerator that outlived everything was that the day goes by quickly if you actually have it all lined up in the power dialer sequencing, right? So the power dialer in your world, or the dialer, lines up everything. And what we were doing as well is we were tying local phone numbers, so that as the numbers are ringing through to the area where this client was, it looked like a local phone number, so they typically pick up. Now, what's really interesting about that, which is, I think, important for people listening, a lot of the times when you get involved in, let's just say, trying to call a customer back, and let's say you're a company that is in Chicago and you're trying to call a client that came to you in New York, they'll see a number that's just ridiculous, and they'll be like, this has got to be a telemarketing call, right? Because it's just, no one would call me from this area code. But if it's regionally based, it changes the whole paradigm, because now people will assume it could be a customer, right? It could be somebody who I know, or it could be whatever. I mean, depending if it's B2B or it's a B2C, right? Because obviously every client's a little bit different. But those, like, just the little teeny things, getting the time down to be able to shuffle between different snapshots or different clients without having to switch between different environments, then having the local numbers. And then obviously, I really think what's cool is what you're doing with AI. I mean, talk a little bit about that, because that to me is kind of becoming the next game changer for a lot of these clients. And I know we've experimented with it, and it's fascinating what's going on.
Yeah. So there's so many uses for that. I literally, just before we got on the phone, we just set up a contractor that has he's still managing his inbound calls, which is interesting because they're not, which you wouldn't consider them a small company revenue wise. They have a ton of revenue, very profitable. But he still takes all of his own calls. The challenge is he gets a lot of sales calls from different companies trying to sell him marketing services and other types of things. But then on top of that, he's got, people that are looking for a job and, all of these things. So it's difficult for him to manage all of those things. So what's really cool about AI is it is actually able to solve that problem with ease, where an inbound call comes in, rather than having a press 1 for sales and 2 for support and 3 for billing and all of that stuff. And then, I don't know if you're like me, I have a little bit of ADD when it comes to those things. Like I'm not listening. And then I get to the end and it's like press 8 to hear this again. I probably had to go through that like 5 times. Anyways, these things, they're smart. So you could just talk to it like a person. And not only does it help the business owner, but it also helps the person who's calling in have a better experience as well. Now, flip it around, they're not just an awesome phone system, right? Like an AI efficient phone system, but they can also make outbound calls. They can handle texts that are coming in. They can handle, what do you call it? Social media, like if you have ads that you're running, they can respond to comments. There's no end to the uses that you can benefit from these things. And what we've been working on in ours is putting all those things together in an easy to set up way where it's not just, it's intuitive. You don't have to go and create like all these extravagant workflows to make it do things. It's literally just, turn this on, click this box, and boom, like write a message. It's easy. So, our goal for the first quarter of next year, which we're almost already there now, is to make these things as intelligent as a normal assistant that is handling inbound leads in your company or making outbound calls. So that means if they're talking to somebody and the person is like, this sounds good, but send me some more information. Boom, it sends the information, and puts it into the pipeline as, a prospect, and, schedules a follow-up, and, all of those things that you would expect a normal agent or a receptionist to be able to do. So yeah, AI is very special.
What do you find now that people, I mean, you've been doing this for a while, you've been in the industry for a long time. What do you think people are gravitating towards? I see you post every once in a while in Facebook, and you sort of say, hey, I've got this new feature, I've got this feature. What are people gravitating towards? What are the things they really like to see when they start talking to you? I'm just curious, because I recently saw something that you did, and I'm just curious if that is active in your community of people who are, jumping into the software. In general, I'm just curious because I want to see if it matches with what I thought it would be.
Gosh, that's difficult. I think it's everybody really kind of wants the same thing. It's not necessarily just like the shiny button gets their attention, right? Like AI, that's the shiny button. Everybody's curious, at least. Like they want to, hear about it and how it might be able to benefit. But you hit the nail on the head when you said it before. They want more time and they want less headaches. That's it. So for me, I've never really I use these as angles, as hooks to get people's attention. But at the end of the day, the conversation always goes towards one direction, and that is solving their problem, like whatever their pain is. So I spend a lot of time trying to find out whatever that is and then building a solution around it. So I don't know if that was what
I was curious if you're going to say speed to lead.
Oh, for sure. Speed to lead is definitely the number one thing I talk about, but I don't think even that, it's funny. That's a sexy thing for guys like me and you who understand how powerful that is.
Oh, it's huge. It's absolutely, that's why I was wondering if that would, to me, be the number one thing, because most of the clients we know talk about getting back to leads. They don't even call
They don't measure it. That's the problem. I don't think it's important to them because they don't know it should be important. They think, well, that person opted in. When I call them and get around to it, they'll be interested. But that's not how it works.
No, not at all. They've already made another phone call to somebody else.
Well, I explain it to my prospects this way, and I think it's the agency's fault for not explaining this because it's really like, this is super important. And if they did explain this, then I think it would make them go, whoa, we need to fix this. Because when you have a Facebook ad, right? Soon as I see a Facebook ad, I go, ooh, cat food, which I don't have a cat. I don't even know why I use that. But still, I fill in a thing. I need that. And then the next thing you know, Facebook's like, oh, this guy needs cat food. Well, let's show him a couple more. So he has some options. So immediately after you get opt-in, next thing you know, you got another cat food. Then you're like, oh, this one's blue. I'll take that one. And then I fill that form up. Next thing you know, over the course of a week, they've showed you all kinds of ads. You've got 5 different competitors that are hammering your phone. And what ends up happening is the consumer is overwhelmed by calls by 3 days in, and they stop answering calls. That happens for somewhere around 7 to 10 days. And then after the 10-day period, it drops off. So I explain to my prospects or my customers what I just explained to you. And I'm like, listen, you want to fix that? Be first to the phone, because everybody else is sending a text or an email. Some, a bunch of calls will come through. But if you get first to the phone before everybody else starts their onslaught of calls, you take them off the couch, right? You get them out of the market and you win. But if you wait, then all of a sudden they stop answering your calls and you're like, why are none of my leads answering the phone? I pay all this money and nobody answers the phone. That's why. It's because you waited too long to call, and now they're getting hammered with calls and they're not answering any phone calls. So
yes. Well, and that's a big question mark, right? Which is that people say, well, I'm going to just text people. I'm going to just, email. I'm going to whatever, message people. Obviously, we're older, and we understand that the older generations thinks like we do, which is that it isn't always about text, especially for, people who have money, like people who are above 40 who used to pick up the phone, still do pick up the phone. And I think the younger generation, 100%, I understand the challenges with that. But I think there's a big quotient here to also consider, which is that it's not just the things that we're talking about from a mechanical standpoint, it's the management layer, right? So part of it is, what happened? And I'm fighting this with one of my clients right now, which is there is certainly a layer of management of the activities that can't be found because people are using iPhones, they're using whatever they're using to call people back in a business, and antiquated systems and multiple ways to communicate with people. But you've got a systematic layer on top that manages, activity. Like you can see, what are people doing during the day? Like that's a big question mark. Like, what did you do all day? Like this is the first time that I've seen what you do, and you're only making an hour's worth of activity for my payment of 8 hours a day. I mean, there's a lot of that, and there's a lot of understanding, like what was the tone of the quality of the call, because now you can read you can see, because there's obviously AI being able to transcribe these calls, and it can understand whether the call went good or went bad. Can you talk a little bit about these little, let's say, Easter eggs that are all throughout the Hot Prospector?
If I were to say like my favorite thing and my least, or my most favorite things are actually all of the above, because I think you need them all. But this one is really eye-opening, because I had a suspicion. This is actually something we never had in our software until about maybe a year ago. All the way up until then, I always had this suspicion, I couldn't put my finger on it. I'm like, why is this person making all these calls, but they're not able to convert any sales? I don't get it. So, and I think, speaking to the agency, a lot of these agency owners that, or even anybody selling B2B, whatever, that hire remote setters or people to make phone calls, they have bad experiences, and they're probably similar to me. Like, I just do this so long that I knew something was wrong. I've been doing it for so long. I've had so many people, so I figured something was wrong. But these other people that's never done this before, they might dip their toe in the water and see this, and they get a bad experience, and they're like, no, that doesn't work, right? Having a remote person, it doesn't work. But what the real problem is that the person wasn't working. And you don't know that because they look to most systems like they are working. So Hot Prospector literally seals off all of those leaks. There's no way. I mean, there's always probably a way, but there's really no way for them to effectively do it unless they're super, super, like, just genius, right? The way it works within Hot Prospector is when they're making phone calls and they stop, we essentially have a timer that starts. And that timer lets us know how long that time period was before they jump back on the phone and made their next call. And then we just kind of timestamp those throughout the day. So if you have a call or an agent that's making calls and you see that they have this big, huge chunk of time that's unaccounted for, we call it call gap. If you have a big, huge chunk of call gap just sitting there, like, for example, I think you even said it, the agent worked an hour for the whole day and they had 6 hours worth of call gap. Well, it should be flipped. You should have 6 hours worth of call time and 1 hour worth of gap where you're taking breaks or whatever. That is a big red flag, right? If I click on that and dial into, or double click into that and drill down into those numbers, what you'll see in Hot Prospector is those actual times, right? So we often see when, this is happening, 2 hours, 1 hour, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, all of these different times throughout the day where people just stopped making calls. So I say all that, knowing how this works. When I bring on an SDR or an appointment setter, or some whatever role that I'm hiring for phone sales, I always show the agent before they start this new magic dashboard, because I want them to know, as a salesperson, salespeople, we care about making commission, right? We want to make more commission. And the way to make more commission is to be your best always. Get better, get better, get better. And, for people who are always trying to improve themselves, they know the best way to do that is to measure themselves. So I show these salespeople the dashboard, and I frame it this way. I say, first of all, you're going to love working with Hot Prospector, because we are going to give you all the metrics of what you're doing every single day. And the way that we do that, look at this cool dashboard. If you click on this, see, it shows how many calls you made and how much your talk time was, and when you started for the day, when you stopped making calls for the day, and what dispositions you marked. And oh, by the way, like when you maybe take a break and you took too long on a break and you just got sidetracked, it tells you that way, when you come back in. And so I frame it in such a way where they know all these things are being matched, or I'm sorry, tracked, but I'm framing it like we're here to help you, right? We're here to help you. It's kind of like when you get the job at the convenience store and the guy says, see that up there? That's a camera. We're watching you. It's similar to that, but we frame it in a way as to help you get better. And most of the salespeople actually appreciate that. And I found, one more point I'll make, when we hire a lot of remote callers, they've all worked for other big companies that use large software enterprise software like Salesloft and Salesforce and HubSpot and all these things. These tools track how many calls they make. They don't track anything else really. And so right. When these companies hire these agents to work remotely, they're getting ripped off because they tell the agent, all we need is 75 calls. Well, guess what these agents do? They make 1 hour worth of calls and the rest of the day they do nothing. Or the smarter ones will do it like 3 times throughout the day. They'll make 30 calls, take a break, make 20 calls, and that's it. And they get paid for months until these companies finally say, it's not working out, you're not producing. But in Hot Prospector, it's flipped. Literally, first day on the phone, we could say, hey, what happened? Oh, I had computer issues. Oh, okay. Second day on the phone, what happened? My mom, called me to run some errands. Eventually that just stops, right. So.
Yeah. And that responsibility is interesting because it does give some credence to consistency of trying to get people that are actually, tolerable to the work environment that I think we know what happens, which is that they actually have to do stuff, which is, go ahead. Yep. Yep. I was going to say what is parallel to that is listening to the conversations, right? So one of the things that I used to do is I would go back in to your software at the end of the week when we had a bad week, and I would go listen and I would just cherry pick around and I'd say, what happened here? What happened here? And there's just absolute gold in there to dig out because you're just listening and you're going, wow. Like, because people don't realize how far off scripts people would go. And I'd listen and I'd go, this person really needs to take a step back and get back on the script when they feel like they're off, because you can just tell like you spent an hour or whatever conversation that went nowhere and you didn't close and you went way off script. You have to, so there's other things to do besides, even the blank time, there's the phone time that you can, record it and hear. And obviously, as I said before, I think those things, because they're automated and stuck in front of your face with a management portal, it's like as a business owner or an agency owner or whoever is going to be, well, let's just say overseeing this, quarterbacking it. There's a lot to be said about what that is for benefits. One of the things I wanted to wrap up on, and I know we could talk forever on this stuff, but I wanted to, before we get into the technical terms, most people listening to this, if they're in the business, they want to know what the model is, right? So we talked about that in the beginning. So in the beginning, we talked about sort of a general business model. Then we went into sort of some of the futuristic stuff, AI and what you could do. And then we talked a little bit about benefits and, the whole management structure. Business model wise, somebody who's listening to this, there is an opportunity here, as we said in the very beginning, right? And we talked about this at length. Let's see if we can come up with a business model for the agency who's listening to this, or a person, an entrepreneur, whoever they are, who could use you to pivot them into a position where they could offer call center services right out of the bat. Like, you could literally call up Mark and say, Mark, I want to offer call center services. I want you to provide me the guy to make the phone calls, or gal to make the phone calls, right? And multi-industry. I mean, let's just call it simple. Just pick up the phone and get the appointment for whatever it might be. Cleaning service, dentist, med spa, whatever, copy center, anything regular business that just needs something that someone calls in, needs help, and there's not anybody to pick it up. Or worst case scenario, that they don't care, which is a lot of the people I know who we've worked with. They just don't care. They're like, I'll call them back on my time, right? Which is, there's a big litany of people that are in the construction, home services that just do not. In fact, I just tried to call the guy who was repairing one of my guitars. No, nobody picks up. It's like, what the hell, right? So yeah. So, the guy who is now thinking about this as an agency say, well, I don't want to hire people. I don't want to install software. I don't want to do anything. I just want to have. So let's talk about that business model, right? Come to you, Mark, and they say, okay, how would it work?
So there's a lot of different ways to offer a service like this. I work with a lot of agencies that use our software for that. So I've heard a lot of models. For example, inbound models where, and this is the kind of focus we have, is more sales driven, not so much support, right? Because there's a lot of, services out there like Ruby receptionists and things like that are going to offer inbound calls. They answer your calls for you, and some of them will even make outbound calls, like Jill's office. I think they do that. But
right.
The key is the salespeople. Not everybody is. Not most companies do not have that as their offering, where it's like, we're not just going to take your call, we're going to help you sell that offering, whatever it is. So if it's a med spa, you don't just ask questions. You have to position the offer. You have to push for the appointment. If somebody has questions, you need to be an assertive individual to help them get as much out of those calls as possible. And so when you're an agency, if you're framing this offer with that first, it's not a call center service, or it's not a BPO. It's not a Jill's office or a whatever, receptionist type deal. It's a sales center that is going to be trained specifically on your thing. Now, as far as pricing is concerned, that puts a whole different level of pricing that you should be charging, because it should be according to the value that they're receiving. That should be the way your pricing should be aligned, right? So that being said, you and I had discussed this before. Having a flat retainer model is not ideal. You should always have some sort of an extra thing in there for you to be able to get compensated for doing better. And you could do that just off of the number of leads that you take. You could do that based off of the number of appointments that you book, but you should definitely have a compensation piece in there to help with that. So, some of the companies I work with, they'll have like a, what do you call it? You charge like a certain
fee.
Well, you have your management fee, but like, for example, a $1,500 a month management fee. And then on top of that, they charge for the booking for the client to guarantee that they're going to show. They'll actually, deposit. And then that deposit goes to the agency. I've seen, that model works really well because, you can keep your retainer lower, but you make more money off of every single appointment that you book. And what's helpful for the client is that when they take a deposit, that increases the show rate. So, and they've also paid something. So they've given their credit card, and they always say second money is easier than first money. And so that's one model. The other that I see a lot of people doing is something similar to what you had mentioned, where it's like a per call number, like a small retainer, like, you know, 750, 1,000, whatever, and then charging like $10, $15 for every single lead after that. So
Yep.
there's so many options.
Yeah, that's what I think the person who listens to this is, that you could work with them. And I've done this before with you, because we've had so many of these discussions, to use you, meaning you don't have to install the software into your high level. You can use Mark's, and you can use Mark's team, and you could start to basically come up with a model that will afford the customer to solve their main problem, which is that they don't want to do anything. That is the number one thing. Hey, what's your problem, Mr. Customer? I want leads and I want to book calls, and I don't want to do anything extra in my business because I'm very busy. And we know this because this is the exact problem I think we run into. You could tell the customer, I will give you $1,000 for you to work with me. And they'll tell you, no, I don't want to work with you. Why? Because it's going to make me have to do extra things. It's not worth the money. It's not. I've had these discussions with clients who they agree. They're like, yeah, you could certainly bring me new business. I absolutely, but I don't want to deal with it because it's just too much work. And I think it's because they don't see the value in having the outsourced resources been basically brought to them on a silver platter without any hiring or without any software. You could just literally go in. Now, obviously, in bigger environments where it makes sense to install, like what we had for building a full-on call center, it's completely different. I get it. But for basic block and tackle stuff, I think agencies would do themselves a favor and speak with you about what they're looking to do and come up with some pricing models where there's a delta enough for them to make. Sorry, for people who don't know what delta is, that's a difference between what you buy and what you sell it at. Is that you will get something reasonable to at least propose to the customer, and the agency still, if they don't want to, put into effect all these challenging, let's just say, things that now they have to do, because a lot of agencies are very simple. And I think that's another challenge that we face, is that you're also complex to the complex, right? But now you're asking two levels, right? You're asking the agency to swallow in this pill of trying to figure stuff out, and then they have to explain it, where it could be just as simple as it's $15 a lead, Mr. Customer, and there's a small retainer fee for us to manage, the software for you. Okay, plug it in. Let's try it out, right? And that, to me, in fact, I had a conversation with a customer today, and the first thing he asked me was, I love the fact that you guys are going to get me a whole bunch of leads, but do you have somebody who can help me with getting them into my calendar? And I said, I sure do. So I think that's a question that also comes up from the very beginning, if an agency is smart, where they should ask what I always did when I was in the very throngs of putting on 30 to 40 new clients a month was, who is the person who's going to be handling all these calls? And you can pretty much, if they say me, that's a screaming help.
Yeah, well, it also means you're not going to keep your client very long.
Yeah. So, Mark, we've done about 40 minutes. So what else would you like to say, and what can people do to get in touch with you? Or what did I miss not asking you?
You're so thorough, Matt. So I can't think of anything that you might have left out. Matter of fact, you brought up a lot of stuff that I was already missing earlier. So, I think just to wrap it up, I would say that if you've been looking for something that will help you keep your customers longer and to get them to spend more, invest more with you, then the thing that you've been looking for is right under your nose. It's the easy button to help you, but your agency, by helping the client with the biggest problem that they have. And so, yeah, great. I'm so glad you invited me here, Matt. Thank you for that, because I really love talking about these things. And if anybody ever wants to get a hold of me, I'm most active on YouTube, And that's where I do the majority of my content and things like that. So you can follow what I'm doing there. Also on my personal Facebook, but I think I'm running out of friends over there. And through Hot Prospector, you can always book a demo, and a lot of times you'll probably see me. So,
well, we'll link it below if you're watching this in YouTube or if you're watching this in one of the social channels. Thanks, Mark. And again, this isn't just for agencies. This is for entrepreneurs of all shapes and sizes. And I know you work with all sorts of businesses direct and other affiliate strategies. So if you have a need for this stuff, Mark is the go-to. So thank you, Mark. We'll catch up soon.